Okay, tonight we're going to be covering, let's see, oh boy, what chapter is this? Number 7. Darren should have marked it in the book itself. What page are we on, guys? 123? All right, so we're on page 123. Yeah, I'll find it one of these days. Okay, 123, the finishing work of the seventh messenger, bringing Yahweh's people to perfection. See, I got that written down here. I really do. Okay, the finishing work. Let's look at this here. This is the finishing work of the seventh messenger, number 1, bringing Yahweh's people to perfection. Very critical for our time period now. The main subject of the sermon is to teach your children to desire the great gifts that's promised. Okay, remember, it doesn't necessarily mean just that you have a family and children, but your children are within you. Remember that. You have your children from all generation. You're carrying within your body right now generations and generations and generations that would populate the universe, okay? To reinforce these scriptures we see in Romans 1:28, and so since they did not like to retain Yahweh in their knowledge, Yahweh gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not proper. See that word reprobate. Here's the meaning of that word reprobate. It's number 96, and it means unapproved. That is, rejected. By implication, worthless. Literally or morally, okay? So when he says that Yahweh gave them over to, they were unapproved. Yahweh did not approve of their actions. They were not selected and chosen. They're worthless in his eyes because they rejected his laws. Okay? And then we'll also be covering Revelations 10, verse 7. In the days of the voice of the seventh Malach, when he will begin to sound, the great secret of Yahweh would be finished, as he declared to his servants the prophets. Now, as you see here, in the days of, this is the whole commission of Yahweh's anointed. Okay, it's his ministry to get us to the point so that this great secret can come to pass. And that's what the prophets longed for. You know, they longed to look into it to understand, but they couldn't. It just wasn't for them. Okay? And then the next scripture we have will be Hebrews 10, verse 22, and 25 and 26. It says, let us draw near a true heart, with a true heart, and full assurance of the faith. Notice that. A true heart. Okay, and Yahweh knows the heart. He judges the heart. With the full assurance of the faith. Okay, we can have full assurance that we know. If you believe in the faith, you remember you believe without seeing, you can have that full assurance. And we see that. This is what the prophets had full assurance, right? The Apostle Shalom had full assurance. He said, I know that I'm going to receive the crown of life. So having this been sprinkled, separating our hearts from the knowledge of evil and our bodies cleansed by water of the ashes of the red heifer. Okay, this was the corrected version here. That, you know, we are blessed to be able to have the ashes of the red heifer to put those things within our bodies and have that protection. Verse 25, it says, not forsaking the gathering of ourselves together. You know, if we forsake the gathering now, then when the true gathering comes, and we're going to gather all those without in the world and bring them to Yahweh's house, we're not going to be a part of it. So we can't forsake the gathering of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but we should be exhorting one another. And so much the more as you see the day approaching. You know, we know that the day of Yahweh is approaching. We know that the day of Yeshua's return is coming soon. And so we need to be uplifting one another. Verse 26, for if we sin willfully, notice, if we sin willfully after we have received the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins. Okay? You know, not forsaking the gathering of ourselves. We see here it says, this is a warning of not gathering here at the protected place when we have the means to do so. We need to think about our actions that we use to justify separating ourselves from coming to the place that Yahweh has chosen. And you hear that, right? You hear about that. You hear announcements on Sabbath. You feeling bad? Okay. So you feel bad. You still need to come keep your appointment with Yahweh. And that's why we can have a separate place for you where you can go in there if you're feeling that bad, you know. You can go in there by yourself, but you're still gathered together with the brethren, and that's what we want to think about. We don't want to forsake the gathering of ourselves together. Here's some vocabulary words we'll cover. Sin is going aside from the path that Yahweh says will bring you peace. And that peace is really something that we need. The word angel in the King James Version actually means messenger. That's why we use malachim. Self-righteousness is thinking that you're more righteous than Yahweh or what's written in the law. And the word see in Revelation 17:15, which of course means many people. The word trumpet is a person or a being, a man or a woman who Yahweh would choose to bring something to the people. A true heart, as we read earlier. A pure heart, being made pure. And of course, that's with Yahweh's word. Pure water, as it talks about, is purified water. And without wavering, that means not bending, not giving way. And the word vengeance, of course, is used in the King James Version in reference to Yahweh, but it actually means judgment, Yahweh's judgment. Remember, he tells us what his judgment is, that he warns the people, if you go this way, you will receive these curses. If you go the way that he says, then you will be blessed. So let's get started here on page 123 here. Now, this was at the Feast of Tabernacles in 2003, 10/11/2003. It says, boy, what a crowd. Praise Yahweh. You can stop now. Yahweh heard you. So, there was a big racket going there, a big, great greeting. It says, you can be seated. Yahweh bless each and every one of you. He says, this is a great crowd. He says, I think we should have done what I suggested and baptized the day before the feast also, because there was a lot of people, I believe, at that time that came. But highlight this. He says, don't forget to rejoice at the feast because it is a command. It is not just a request. Highlight that part. Don't forget to rejoice at the feast because it is a command. It's not just a request. And if you want some reference notes, in Leviticus 23:40, and Deuteronomy 16:11. Deuteronomy 16:11. So it's Leviticus 23:40 and Deuteronomy 16:11. And they both say about rejoice at Yahweh's feast. Because remember, he says, you and your family, you come and you rejoice before Yahweh. And that's what the feast is all about, of course. He says, of course, you should be rejoicing in Yahweh now. He says, what I mean by rejoicing with your brothers and sisters in Yahweh, notice, is getting things right according to his law and rejoicing because you have them. Getting things right according to Yahweh's law. And rejoicing in the fact that you have gotten those things right. You have learned. You have drawn closer to Yahweh. Because remember, all of our lives we were separated. And as the scripture says, we were aliens to the righteousness of Yahweh, right? So it took Yahweh calling us and reconciling us through Yeshua and teaching us and taking time with us in order to bring us to the point where we are now, to where now we can get things right. And remember, right means righteous. So we're getting things righteously done, according to the laws of Yahweh. Because we're actually understanding what the law of Yahweh is and rejoicing because of that. Verse 4, he says, I was looking forward to this feast with great zeal and joy. And that's the way, of course, each of us should feel, with a great zeal and joy because of the fact that it's a time like no other, right? I remember years and years ago, someone who is here now, but he asked me, he says, why do you go to those feasts, And I said, I can't explain it. I said, it's beyond words. You just have to come and experience it, And he did. And then I remember him telling me, he says, I know what you mean now about why you had to experience it, And that's the way it is. It's great zeal and great joy because it's unspeakable. It's something that we just have never realized before, the great joy that there is in life because you enjoy life. You have the power of life. Okay, that's what Yahweh's laws are. That's the power of life. Remember, Yeshua said, I came that you might have life more abundantly, right? And he says the flesh is useless without the law because it's the law. Keeping the law of Yahweh is where the power of life resides. And that is what we will have to keep us alive throughout all eternity because we will be obedient. Our bodies were made in a way in which they would remain. We would remain alive forever. But what occurred? Sin. Sin entered in, and as soon as you start breaking the laws of Yahweh, dealing with the health food laws, your body totally starts breaking down. And so now it's got to renew itself and rebuild itself. And as you keep Yahweh's laws and you're obedient to them, then your body begins, on that course, remember, every 7 years to rebuild itself. And that's how we can remain alive forever. So he says, I guess it was noticeable, but I was rejoicing, and a few people said something about it. He says, it was right in the middle of troubles and setbacks, death, hurt feelings, and misery. But in all of that, we rejoiced. Okay, 2003, that was a year when certain things occurred. But we rejoiced. Okay, let's see here. Here's some reference notes that we will cover. Philippians 4 through 9, and Jacob 1, 2, and 3. But notice he says, rejoice in Yahweh always. Again I say rejoice. Always rejoicing. And we could do that if we would really realize what we have to be thankful for. Let your moderation be known to all men that Yahweh is at hand. Be anxious about nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to Yahweh. You know, you have to pray to Yahweh and let him know the things that you're thankful for, and bring those things to him in prayer when you need him. And notice verse 7, and the peace of Yahweh which surpasses all. Look at that word all. A-L-L, it's all understanding will keep your hearts and minds. Notice he keeps your hearts and minds. He keeps it in the right place. Remember, the laws of Yahweh is what changes the hearts and minds. And so the peace of Yahweh will keep our hearts and our minds through Yeshua Messiah. Because remember, it's through him that we can reconcile to Yahweh with that peace. Verse 8, finally, brothers, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of righteous report. You see how it keeps building and building and building and building in the explanation? If there's any virtue, if there's any praise, think on these things. And that's what we need to be doing. We need to be thinking about these things. We need to be thinking about the things that are true, the things that are pure, the things that are lovely, the things that are righteous, have righteous report. If you thought about a righteous report, would you talk about somebody? No, you wouldn't knock somebody, right? You'd be thinking about a righteous report. And that's the way we have to look upon one another, is that you are Yahweh to me and I'm Yahweh to you, right? And Yahweh doesn't knock his people down. He forgives them, and it goes on. Okay, back to this. It says, and the things which you have learned and received. Notice, you've learned from the house of Yahweh. There's only one place you've learned these things. And you have received them, okay? You have to receive them. And when you receive them, that means you take them into your life. The laws, you claim those laws. Those laws are now yours. Yahweh gives you his laws for you to keep. And you keep them, they become you. Just like you're part of Yahweh. And the things, notice, that you have heard. So you have to learn. You have to hear. Remember Deuteronomy 6:4? Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is one. That word hear means to hear intently with the intention to obey. Okay, with the intention to obey. And the things you saw in me, and the examples that were set, do these and the peace of Yahweh will be with you. And then Jacob 1, 2, and 3 says, my brothers, count it all joy when you fall into various temptations, knowing that the testing of your faith develops endurance. Okay, endurance. Endurance is trusting in Yahweh. So you count it all joy, because the temptations will be there, but you have to overcome these things. Okay? Let's get back to the book. He says, it's kind of like one of the elders was telling me about someone close to him who had died. And I said, well, he'll never want to make that mistake again because he died of AIDS. So when he's resurrected, that person is not going to think about doing that lifestyle again to catch AIDS again. He knows what it was like to suffer. He says, you're going to be hearing more about AIDS now. He says, it's picking up rapidly now. They're trying to keep it unknown for some reason, but it's everywhere. So is mad cow disease. You haven't heard of mad cow disease in a long time, right? It has been a while. But notice here's an article. It says, mad cow disease is still a threat, but we might finally have a blood test for it. So mad cow disease, or bovine spongiform encephalopathy, is one of the scariest and the strangest conditions in the past 20 years. The degenerative disease is spread through infected cow meat and blood transfusions and causes rapid brain decay. So see, if somebody has mad cow and they give blood and somebody takes that blood, they can catch it themselves. Notice it's always fatal and there's no cure. What did Pastor just talk about on Sabbath? No cure for their diseases, right? But most terrifying of all, doctors have never been able to test for it and still aren't sure how many people could be infected, which is why people who have lived in the UK during the 80s and 90s still aren't allowed to donate blood. 80s and 90s. Does it seem that long ago? Wow. It just doesn't seem like it's been that long. For those young enough to remember the big mad cow disease scare of the 90s, the condition seemed to appear out of nowhere. Remember, it just caused fatal degeneration of the brain and the spinal cord. And they said, don't eat the spinal cord. But the first symptoms are usually depression and hallucinations, which is then followed rapidly by dementia and loss of motor control. Within a year of symptoms arising, most patients will be dead. But the more researchers find out about the condition, the more scarier it seemed. It's now known that the disease is spread through misfolded proteins known as prions. These weird molecules start out as harmless brain proteins, notice. They're harmless to start off with, but they become mutated somehow, and they turn into highly contagious pathogens that recruit other prions that come into contact with, grouping together in clumps that damage the brain. It's not yet clear how long prions can remain dormant in blood, notice, in the blood. In cows, it often takes 2.5 to 5 years for symptoms to appear. And incubation periods as long as 50 years have been reported in humans. 50 years. And people that live with it wouldn't even know it, you know. They wouldn't even know they have it. Okay. So he says, I told you this is going to increase. Well, it's just about, going back in verse 5 here. Well, it's just about in every nation right now, in every state except Texas. I believe Yahweh is keeping it away from here. I do believe also that if you eat meat from any other place than this one, you're probably playing what they call Russian roulette. You could get this at this time. You know, you can't see the microbes with the eyes, but you could get it if you eat anything outside what the house has provided. You're playing Russian roulette. They have cattle born with it now. Cattle born with it now. You remember in Deuteronomy, this is a reference source as well. Deuteronomy 25, 28, 15 through 16, 18, and 21 and 22. He says, if you don't obey Yahweh your Father and don't carefully follow all these laws, notice, if you don't carefully follow them, if you just half-heartedly follow them, you're going to do something to mess up even your livestock. Cursed will be in the city. Cursed will you be in the country. Well, the country is where all the food's grown, but the city is where it ends up at, right? Cursed will be the fruit of your body. Notice the produce of the land, the calves of your herds. Yahweh prophesied all this already. And the lambs of your flocks, because of the wickedness that you have done and forsaken me. And notice verse 21, it will come to pass that you will cause the plagues to cling to you until you are destroyed from off the land that you're entering to possess. So he gave us much warning that we need to do what he says to do if we want to be protected. Now, back in verse 6, he says, they have the cattle born with it. He says, I tell you what they're trying to do. They're trying to kill the cattle before they become sick with it. It's that prevalent. It's that prevalent among the wildlife population, too. The deer and the elk. The deer and the elk. Here's an article I found about hunters reminded to watch for chronic wasting disease because they still have to do it. It says the hunters brace for a 2020 field season in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic, but they still got to deal with the more persistent wildlife disease problem, chronic wasting disease. It still isn't going away. Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Region spokesman Dylan Tavish told the newspaper, hunters have been really invested in helping with us. He says they know what's at stake. It's not as if there weren't enough disease issues in the world now that they got to put up with this too, you know. In the past 2 years, Montana authorities detected an alarming rise, okay, in mule deer being infected. So, you know, it's still there. You don't hear a lot about it. It's still there. Okay, verse 7 here. He says, you might have read where the government inspectors say that you don't have to worry about mad cow disease. They say, just don't eat the brain or the spinal cord. They're having a huge population in the deer and the elk come down with the mad cow disease. Did they eat the brain and the spinal cord? It rather knocks that theory in the head, doesn't it? They will have killed thousands and thousands of them, but they're trying to keep that a secret too. You know, they don't want it made known. But it's not just, you know, as they say, the brain and the spinal cord, because these deers have it. The wildlife population has it in their brains, in their spinal cords, you know, and they're not eating other animals, you know. All right, verse 8, he says, back to rejoicing. Okay, highlight this whole paragraph here. He says, you could rejoice in knowing that Yahweh is pulling you out of this mess and is actually going to save your life if you would do what he tells you to do. That is rejoicing in Yahweh. Rejoicing in the truth, as one of the apostles said, rejoicing that Yahweh showed you the truth so you can turn from sin. Okay, so you can turn from sin. That whole paragraph there. Rejoicing knowing that Yahweh's pulling you out of the mess. He's actually going to save your life when he tells you what to do. You can't save your life if you're not told what to do to save your life, right? So Yahweh tells us through his laws what we must and must not do. And that's rejoicing in Yahweh. It's rejoicing in the truth. Remember, the laws of Yahweh is truth, as one of the apostles said as well, that rejoicing that Yahweh has shown you the truth so you can turn from sin. You know, even if we might fall 7 times, the scripture says, pick yourself back up and keep on going, right? So Yahweh gives us the means by which we can do these things. Verse 9 says, speaking of rejoicing, I got a taste of it yesterday. He says, I beat everybody out of bed yesterday except for the cooks. I knew that they worked all night. And they do, man. I mean, they put in a lot of hours, you know. While we're still sleeping in bed, they're up, going at it. He says, I knew that they worked all night. He says, I got here about 5 in the morning, and I pretended to stop and say hello. But I actually smelled their food. He says, I don't know if you like tamales. I've loved them all my life. I've tried to make them, and I never could get the right texture or the right ingredients. I could never get them the right taste, that they were either too doughy or gummy, or they just crumbled to pieces. You know, you have to know what you're doing when you make those things, that's for sure. The flavor of the ones I made, he says, were not right. When I tasted these, I said, this is a perfect tamale. It could not have been any better than this. You know, I mean, that's the great thing about Yahweh's house, is that when recipes and stuff are brought out, I mean, the things are done to perfection. They're better tasting here than anywhere else because of the fact that we have the ingredients that we have and the things that we can make this food with. I mean, when you can make it with undefiled meat, you know, that's a tremendous blessing. And organic vegetables and stuff, you know, it's like it's the perfect place. So he says, it could not have been any better than this. He says, my mouth is still watering, and I ate about 5 or 6 of those things yesterday. He said, I told the elders I want to marry the person that made these. And one of them said, I don't think you want to. I asked, why not? And he said, it's a man. He said, there were some men working back there in the kitchen. He said, I quickly repented, of course. I think today is that Tex-Mexican day, he says. I feel sorry for those who don't get them. He says, I don't think that they made enough either. He says, I hate to tell you, but I think they should have made about 4,000 of them. And I think they made about half that. That is something you could just sit down and eat a half a dozen of them real easy, you know. Now, look in verse 11. He says, I would like to beg the mothers and the fathers and really plead with you to help your children. That is so important to do. That's your responsibility, you know. That's the reason why you have children. It's your responsibility to take care of them. You don't realize the amount of stress on them unless you've heard the X-rated sermons. you know, and it's sometimes something that parents don't really think about is the children live stressful lives as well. It's a stressful time period in which we're alive in these last days, more so than any other time period. He says you don't realize the sin that comes with exposing the body, okay? You don't realize the sin that comes with exposing the body. We covered this in the last chapter. Gahan had gone over this, and this was in the last chapter we covered, in chapter 15, pages 116, verse 45. He says, now get this in your minds, because I'm going to show you the rest of it in detail in the following scriptures, of what sin does to you when you start thinking on it. When you start thinking on it, something goes into your mind. We know now from scientific reports and evidence that certain things are held in the body, kind of imprisoned. The body is holding them there and will not let it go to the mind. We also know that under certain conditions that these things are released. One of the ways this is done is by looking at someone to lust after that you have no permission to lust after. This releases some of these things in the body, okay? And that's the danger of it. And if you remember Yeshua's words, he said, the eye is the light of the body. Well, when you think about the light and stuff, the scripture says that the light is the law of Yahweh is light. That should be within our minds. But with the eye sees through light. If you're in pitch black, you can't see anything, right? But if you got light, you can see. You need light, okay, a light source to see. And as it says, the eyes is the light of the body. What you see with your eyes, you take into your mind. You take it into your body. And then you have something you look at, you think about it. And remember, it says, once you start thinking about something, as Jacob said, the temptation, then it will build. The temptation itself is not sin. You have to be tempted. You have to resist. Remember, Yeshua said, I made a covenant with my eyes, not to look at these things. So you see it with your eyes. It enters into your minds. The thoughts will come up. But you can push them out. You have to. That's the endurance. That's the part of endurance. That's the overcoming of righteousness, okay? But the eyes, the light is both a particle and a wave. They can't decide whether it's one or the other or both. Because a wave, frequency goes up and down, turns on and off, on and off, on and off in a cycle. And particles are just particles that go. And you remember the experiments that if you looked at light, it changes it and so forth. And that's the way it is with your mind. When you look and you see certain things with your eyes, you can change the way you feel. You can also change the way another person feels, And like the old saying, in the world, love at first sight. No, it's not love, it's lust. Lust at first sight, because that's what the communication that makes. That's why I always tell women, if you're driving and you stop at a stop sign or you stop at a stoplight, and there's more than one lane, never ever look over and look at a man in his eyes. Because as soon as that light turns green and you take off, he's going to follow you. Because you just sent him a signal. You send a signal through your eyes, through the contact, and that's how the brain makes communication and so forth too. So you have to be very careful with these things, and that's why Yahweh warns us. And Yeshua said, don't even look. If you look, you've committed lust already in your heart and in your mind. Because as he said, these things are released. Okay? They stay within your body. Because just because you haven't, children are born with STDs, but just because someone has an STD doesn't mean that an STD is going to manifest. It will remain in the body, but something can release it. And if a man has excessive lust and so forth, these are the things that can actually release certain things within his body that he could pass on to his wife and put it into the children and so forth. So you got to be careful with that. So he continues on. He says, I don't care how you expose your body. You can have it covered and still expose it by having too tight of dresses or skirts or pants. And this goes for men too. If you look at the the disgusting fashions that they have for men, the tight jeans and the shirts that are form-fitting and stuff. I like loose clothes. Always have. You want to feel comfortable in clothes. And they make them tight and to show off their bodies and to express these things to other men. And so that desire is there, even in the eyes of the men as well. But too tight of clothing. And that's why we have a dress code. We have a dress code, and our dress code states what is modest and pure and acceptable in the eyes of Yahweh, and what is not. Okay? And this is why, our women, because they're all righteous, they'll take things that people, it floors you when you see some of the things that are worn that's supposed to be a dress. It'd be like, man, you may as well be in your underwear, It'd be like, how can you walk outside with something like that on, But the women will take these things and mix them with skirts and dresses and all this stuff, and they actually act as accents to dress up a place and stuff, and and they can do a lot of things with this. But the world, of course, wants to expose themselves. Okay, it says, so it doesn't have to be exposed in skin, but even that is being done. It doesn't expose skin, and that's the way, you see, the fashion industry is a bunch of perverts, okay? They're perverted minds and they're perverted people. They're a bunch of queers and homosexuals and stuff, and they design the clothing. And this is why the design, if you look and you can pick things out with people. You watch the way certain fashions are made. Watch the way certain pockets are put on pants. And men, you need to watch this. You don't buy jeans that got these designers, emblems and stuff on your back pockets. What's that designed for? So you can walk and you can wiggle your butt and the women will go goo-goo over you. See, don't fall into the trap that Satan has made and stuff. Be very careful with these things. And you watch and you see the way certain designs are made with certain buttons and certain things are put in certain locations to attract the eye. Bing! Right at a person. So Satan is very crafty. She's very subtle in what she does. And so if you're not aware of something, ask. Ask the priest, ask your counselors to find out whether you should be wearing something or not. So verse 12 here, highlight this. He says, Hollywood and the Hollywood movie stars are pushing this. Okay? Hollywood and the Hollywood movie stars are pushing this. They certainly do. Because everybody likes to wear the latest fashion. Just like they have these catchphrases in all the Hollywood movies that people start off with talking. And before you know it, it spreads. So he says, Satan is using this. Satan is out to destroy the world. That's her job. You realize that? That's her job. Her job is to destroy the earth, to try and destroy the heavens and the earth. The reason why she wants to destroy the heavens is because she knows the heavens is what helps support the earth. So she wants to destroy these things. She wants to destroy the entire world. And remember, the word world means the inhabitants of the earth. Okay? Mankind. And this is her last effort. She says, I'm going to show you that in the scriptures. This is her last effort, the last great push to try and cause the hatred that she has generated down through the years to actually destroy the house of Yahweh. When you think about it, she's had 6,000 years to work on mankind. And it says she's very wise, she's very crafty, she's very powerful, and it's all been given into her hands. But you think about it, the amount of time, 6,000 years she's led mankind and caused mankind to go into a lifestyle that would kill themselves. But she's also somewhat held it back so that not everybody would get sick, because then everybody would die off too soon. And the demons love torture. They know they have a certain amount of time and they're milking it, so to speak. They want the people to suffer. They enjoy seeing that suffering. They like that. They get a thrill off of that. And so they allow mankind to get sick and to suffer and to die slow deaths. And she's got the power to do that. It's been given to her. So the fact that if Yahweh could not protect his house, brethren, he would lose the battle, because Satan would destroy it and there would be no one to raise the dead. No one to raise the dead. You know, Yahweh has all power. He is all powerful. He has all power. He allows Satan to have certain power over mankind to do certain things. But however, remember, like you see with the book of Yashub, he limits her. She can only go so far. She can't do things that will completely destroy and wipe out the plan of Yahweh. Yahweh's plan has to take its time to bring about what it needs to bring about. It can't be rushed. It has to go along in this certain time period that it's allowed, that he has allotted for it, you know. And sometimes, you know, we may think, you know, come on, kingdom, we want the kingdom to come. Brethren, if you thought about those words, it shows that, and you just think that, come on, kingdom, you know, it shows that you're not really thinking about what you're saying. Because you're going to see hell. You're going to see hell. We're going to see this world dying off. And it's going to come so close to us that it might even shake your faith and make you want to run back into the world to think that you can protect yourself. Because remember, it says, on the left and the right side, you're going to see people dying off. And when these plagues start hitting, and all life is destroyed in the sea, and all life is destroyed in the rivers, don't you think it's going to freak the hell out of people? It's going to freak you out too. You know, if you're not grounded firmly in Yahweh's laws and not realize that all this has to come to pass to where all life is going to get to the point of just dying. This whole earth is going to literally just come down upon itself. You got to realize that Yahweh is going to protect us. He's going to keep us alive. Okay? But it's going to be a very trying time. So remember, Satan, remember what Yahweh said with Daniel, that Satan would try to mentally attack, to wear out the saints. That means mentally. Mentally, in your mind. Okay? So when you start seeing these things come to pass, you know that your redemption is drawing near, and that's what you got to keep hanging on to. But at the same time, she's going to try and wear you down. Because she didn't want you to do your job. And notice what he says next here. That's our job. What is our job? To raise the dead. If Satan could destroy the house of Yahweh, there'd be no one to raise the dead. That is our job, and Yahweh knows it. He has assigned it to us in the law that he has given to us. It's assignment in the law of Yahweh. The law of Yahweh is from the very beginning. Yahweh created the whole earth in accordance with his law. Nothing is made that isn't made according to Yahweh's law. Everything exists in the whole universe according to the law of Yahweh. And there are laws that keep certain things into motion, such as gravity and things like that. You know, these are all laws that play a big role in keeping mankind alive. But if Satan could destroy the house of Yahweh, then the assignment that Yahweh has given would never be fulfilled. See, and he's not going to allow anything to step in there and interfere with his plan. He will bring it to a certain point, and if Satan tries to do something, nope, you can't touch it. You know, and he will protect those certain things. But everything is assigned in the law. And raising the dead is also one of the things. Because you remember it says, by man, sin entered into the world. By man, sin will exit the world too. Okay? Because we're going to teach the laws of Yahweh. And death entered in because of sin. Life will enter in because of mankind. We will bring forth life. That's the fantastic thing. You think about, you know, Yeshua knew that. Remember Yeshua said, I have life within me that the Father gave me. I can lay down my life and I can pick it back up again. He had that confidence. He knew he was going to be resurrected because he knew that Yahweh is the source of all life. you will also have that life. You will also have the power to resurrect people, to heal people, to do whatever is needed to keep a person alive, because that's our job. This is why we have to have love and respect for all living creatures, no matter what it is. No matter what it is. Because of the fact that our job is going to be to keep those things alive. You know, that little pretty butterfly that's on the other side of the earth that's now extinct has just caused something to occur on this side of the earth and every other part of the earth, even in the Arctic, in the Antarctic. And when we learn all of those things and why Yahweh has made all of these things in which each job they have to keep mankind alive, we'll understand that when certain animals went extinct, this is how it affected mankind. But people think, I don't have to worry about that. It don't affect me. You know, I live over here. I got all I need right here. It doesn't affect me. That's on the other side of the world. I ain't worried about it. I don't live in that area. You know, and that's the foolish talk and the foolish mindset that people have, because they don't realize that everything works together in unison. Yahweh is a unit. He's unity. He works together. Okay. Now let's get back here. So he says in verse 13, okay, highlight this paragraph too. He says, I plead with you to help your children to dress properly at all times. Not only here at the feast, dressing modestly means not showing the body. You know, men, you don't unbutton your shirts. You button your shirt all the way up, you know. You don't have to do the very top one in the summertime, but you do go up to the second button, you know, where you button up properly. But we have to learn to dress modestly, because we know that what goes on in the brain and how this affects things, okay, and how easily sin. You know, the thing is that sometime men in confession might say something about, well, you know, this woman walked by, you know, and it's like, you know, well, I didn't really think about her, nothing. I didn't really lust after her, nothing like that. Really? How do you know? How quick does it take a signal to go to the brain? Instantly. So as soon as you see nakedness, that right there is sin on your brain. You know, and you have to confess these things, that you've seen the nakedness of the world, you know. And you have to pray to Yahweh that it doesn't affect you in other ways, which can cause other problems, like sometimes people talk about. So dressing modestly means not showing the body. He says, listen to me now, to the chances. He says, I can guarantee you, young men, the statistics right now, if you marry a person because you like the shape of her body, the chances are almost 100%, about 98.99 or something like that, that your marriage is going to end up with another man involved. Because if she attracted you because of that, how many other men is she attracting? I always thought about that. I always thought about how crazy that is, that men would show off their women, you know, hey, this is my babe, man, you know. Look how beautiful she is, you know, and she's exposing herself to all of these men. It's like, you nuts, man, you know. He says, I can guarantee you these things. Now he says, this is the character of this woman who I'm talking about, okay? Verse 14, he says, if you marry a person for this reason, it means that you have seen and you have lusted after this person. Other men have done the same thing. And the chances are almost 100% that your marriage will end up with other men. You won't even know who your children are, and so forth. The chances are 100% that you'll end up with a death dose of over 125 sexually transmitted diseases. That's pretty bad, you know. And I'm sure you probably have known someone or heard that before in someone's life that they didn't know whether that child is theirs or not. You know, pretty bad. But you see, the true Ahab of Yahweh is to not get into that situation to begin with. You know, Yahweh wants to prevent all of these things. He doesn't want us to have to go through that. Verse 15 says, if you go out and let your children do this after this information is brought to you, brethren, you too deserve to burn with them if you don't try to help them. It's that serious. Why? Because you become a partaker of it, right? You actually encourage it and allow it if you don't correct it and bring it to their attention. Because children need to learn. We all need to learn. And we're all children. Don't forget that. We're all children, right? We're all the children of Yahweh. So we all need to learn. He says, I beg you to get those tapes, those X-rated sermon tapes. There's a world of information in there. He says that I can't bring out in mixed company. We describe what things go on in your body and in the woman's body, and that takes place even in the mind when lust first starts. You start going downhill from there. Yahweh made the mind and the body to be perfect, to work at its optimum level. But that's what sin does. Sin weakens the body. It weakens the mind. And it begins to bring you down, 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 down. That's why people fall into depressions and so forth. Because they have nothing to excite them anymore. They forget about the laws of Yahweh. They let something get to them and it begins to depress them. And they begin to think on those things. And that's what builds up in the mind. But he says you can start going downhill from there. You need that information. He says, I don't have time to cover it now. But play them to your children and let them know. It will save their lives if you will get them to listen to these and find out what is actually out there. If you remember those, there were some pretty, people would say pretty graphic things, but, Pastor humbled himself to bring this to us, to get us to understand that this is what you're facing, you dumbass, if you don't realize how stupid you are and you want to play around in the world. This is what you can expect, And so he brought that to his attention like a slap in the face, wake up, because this is what you can see. This is what's out there. This is the truth of what the world is. Satan, of course, covers it all up. She makes it look much better, But that's why it says she's crafty. And, if we looked at sin and saw what sin actually was staring us in the face, you think we'd go after it? You'd run like, out of the way, right, to get away from it. But that's how subtle it is. So he says, if you can get them to listen to it, they actually see what's actually out there. He says, they don't have to take my word for it. They just search the news. They can see it in today's news. He says, in this series, this feast, he says, I want you to understand how much time we have. And how many times do people say, he's been saying that for so many years, I've heard in the house of Yahweh said, that the end time is just right around the corner. Well, guess what? It is right around the corner now. There ain't no getting out of it, No getting out of it. So, people who talk against those things, it's foolishness because you talk against the work if you don't believe what's being said. Pastor's the only one that could figure out the prophecies anyway, But the thing is that he knew, and he knew we needed the time, He knew we needed the time to get ourselves right, to get to a certain point, and that's when Yahweh can use us. And when we get to that certain point that he's ready for us and knows, okay, now they're ready. That's when the revealing is going to come, and everything will come to pass. He says, I'm also 100% certain that we understand the secret of Yahweh. He says, I'm almost 100% certain now that we understand the secret of Yahweh. This is what Yahweh calls every work he has had. He calls the secret work of Yahweh, and he keeps it a secret. Let's look at some scriptures here. The secret work of Yahweh. What's Revelation 10:7? Okay? Because in the days of the voice of the seventh Malach, when he will begin to sound, the great secret of Yahweh would be finished, as he declared to his servants, the prophets. Now, it's not the understanding of the secret, but that in his day it would be finished, it says, right? It would be finished in that day. Because unveiling and the description of these things is being made known to us. Ephesians 3:9 says to make all. Now that's only the called out ones, okay? Only the called out ones. When he says make all see how, because, the wicked will never understand these things, so they can't see it. but to see how this secret is administered, because it's done only through Yahweh's last days witness as he teaches his seed to inherit it. Okay? That's the administration of Yahweh's house, Yahweh's government, which has been noticed. It has been hidden in Yahweh from the beginning of the ages, who created all things. You know, it's never been understood before in the last days, completely understood. And I said, note, it's only in these last days that the book of Yahweh has come to pass. Before, it was in sections, and of course it was hidden away and stuff. So they didn't have the complete book of Yahweh to know the complete plan of Yahweh. The secret. Okay, Colossians 1, 26 and 27. The great secret which has been hidden from ages, and notice, from generations, but has now been revealed to his saints. Now notice, saint is one who keeps the whole law. So none of the ones before us could completely understand it. You know, they couldn't do this. As the house of Yahweh was only established in the last days, remember. So we're the only ones in man's history who can meet here at the prophesied place to learn about this great secret and actually have part in it. And this is why the secret was hidden from other generations. But now it's been revealed to his saints, those who keep the whole law. Verse 27, to whom Yahweh willed to make known, notice, to make known what are the riches of the glory of this great secret among the nations, which is the Messiah, the hope of glory. So he made known the riches of the glory of this great secret. So, how's the riches of the glory of this great secret is made known? In Ephesians 4:1, 4 through 11 says, because he chose us with him before the foundation of the world. Remember, foundation is the body of consulting officials in heaven, right? They consult with Yahweh in forming and creating things in the heavens. Before the foundation of the world. The world also means the universe as well, remember. That we are to be sacred and without blame before him in ahab, or love. Preordaining us to be his children by adoption. Why? Because remember, his original sons lost their inheritance. So mankind is not a spiritual being, so we have to be adopted into the family of Yahweh and then become a spirit being. Through Yeshua Messiah, notice, according to the righteous pleasure of his plan. Notice, it's according to his plan, okay, that these things take place. Now, continue on there in verse 6, he says, to the praise of the glorious ahab, love, with which he has honored us in the one whom he ahabs, in whom we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of trespasses according to the riches of his pardon. Remember, the glorious riches, and that's what it said. Remember, it says, to whom, to make known what are the riches of the glory of the great secret among the Gentiles. Well, there's your glorious and riches involved in there. In verse 8, notice, which he made to abound towards us in all wisdom and understanding. You, brethren, are the wisest people on the face of the earth. You know that? You're the wisest people on the face of the earth in the house of Yahweh. And we have the most understanding of all things. And so having revealed to us the great secret of his plan, remember, it was hidden from other generations, and it wasn't being able to be understood, not even by the prophets. They didn't understand. According to his righteous pleasure, which he has purposed to himself. It's Yahweh's great secret. So he's purposed these things to himself. It's his righteous pleasure to reveal things the way that he wants things revealed. Continue on here, he says, verse 10, for the administration of his house in the completed time. Well, that's what we're looking for. It's a completed time, right? Which is only in the days of the seventh month. To gather together to one to himself. That's the great gathering. You know, greater than the time of Moshe. We're all coming together into unity to do that now. Under one head, the Messiah. Both the things that are yet in the heavens, you know, our work hasn't yet begun through the universe of bringing peace, joy, and true ahab. And the things also for the earth in him. Because remember, it starts here on earth first, and then we're going to go throughout the universe. In verse 11, in whom also we are allotted an inheritance, being preordained as set forth, as all things work according to the purpose of his plan. Because remember, Yachanan, all things are done according to his plan, right? So the great secret of Yahweh's work is his plan coming to completion in the revealing of the sons and daughters of Yahweh, which could only be revealed in these last days when his house would be established in the last days, because the last will be first, as he said. Okay? It's a beautiful, beautiful promise that Yahweh's given it to us. And now we know, we understand and we know, it's secret to the rest of the world, because they kind of can't understand it, but we do. So continue on here. He says, highlight this. He says, the rest of that paragraph. Ours was kept the most secret because it's the one that Satan wanted to destroy. She's still wanting to destroy this work and is still in hopes of having nuclear wars and incurable diseases. Okay? Highlight all of that. And then for references, you can take Matthew 24, 7 and 29, Isaiah 24, 5 and 6, and Daniel 8, 25. Now, notice verse 17. He says, they have had this in heaven. They're having it right now among the beings there. They're still trying to find cures. Okay? Notice that. It's in the heavens. Well, how do we know it's in the heavens? Let's look at something here. Deuteronomy 30, verse 19. You remember Yahweh says, I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you this day. So he's talking about what's in the heavens and what's on the earth. In Yada 1, verse 6 and 7, you remember the Malachim who did not keep their first estate, but left their own habitation, he has reserved an everlasting change in the darkness to the great day. Notice, in the same manner, Sodom and Gomorrah, have gone to fornication and strange flesh and set forth an example for those who will be judged. But notice, in the same manner, those inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah, the world, did what? They followed the example of the Malachim who left their first estate. So these things are being experienced in the heavens as well. And you see here in Nehemiah 9:6, you alone, O Yahweh, you have created the heavens, the heaven of heavens, and all their host, which means there's beings out there in the heavens. We're not the only ones here on earth. The earth and everything upon it, and the waters and everything in them, you've preserved them all, and the host of heaven worship you. So, note, if they worship, then that means they're subject to blessings and curses. And if they're suffering the same curses as well, because there's nothing new under the sun here on earth, and these beings desire unity as well, and that's why they're looking forward to us being revealed, to bring unity to them. Colossians 1:20 says, and through Yeshua to reconcile all things to Yahweh, having made peace through the blood of his sacrifice. Notice, whether the things on earth or the things in the heavens. The beings, the ones who are out there who are waiting. They're waiting for us. They want to see us. They want the revealing of the sons of Yahweh to come to pass. Revelations 12:12, he says, therefore rejoice, you heavens, and those who dwell in them. How much plainer can you get than that, right? Those who dwell in them. Notice 2 Kepha 3:7. By the same plan, the heavens and the earth, notice, they're waiting until the day of judgment. And then in Romans, he says, I consider the sufferings at the present time. Notice, creation waits for the revealing of the sons of man because they're suffering as well. Because creation itself wants to be delivered from the bondage of corruption. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning up to this present time. So they're suffering just like we are. They have the same kind of diseases and things that we see going on in the world. It's no different. Now, getting back to the book, he says, they're still trying to find cures. They're trying to make you think that they can raise you from the dead. They want to make you think that the gods can raise you from the dead and heal your body, which is poppycock, he says. There's nobody who can do that except Yahweh. Well, you remember in Genesis 3:4, what did Satan say? You shall not die. Well, you remember Yeshua said, no, it's the laws of Yahweh that give you life. But Satan was saying that, no, you don't need those laws to give you life. That she can raise you from the dead and keep you alive. And that was all part of the teachings, really, that was presented to mankind back then. Even though we don't see these things, written out in black and white and stuff. These are the types of things that Satan was telling and tempting and teaching them and influencing Cain to talk to Eve about and to do these things. And this is why they fell for these things and mankind became deceived. But nobody can do that except Yahweh. What we see in verse 18, he says, as a scientist says so, Yahweh, the best cure is prevention. Prevention is what Yahweh offers, okay? Because Yahweh doesn't want to see anyone suffer. He doesn't want us to experience or to experiment with things in life. He wants us to have the joy and the peace and so forth that Yahweh gives into us. Okay, we're going to have to stop here. This is on verse 18 on page 124, and we'll take off there next week.